Hello and welcome to Dixon Cox with me, Nick Dixon, and Paul Cox. The show that's probably the closest thing you'll find to GB News headliners, and I mentioned that for no reason at all. How are you doing, Paul?
I'm okay, thanks, Nick. Yeah, interesting mention of headliners there, but do you know what? If I couldn't see headliners, I would probably just watch this.
I think you're right, Paul. In a totally hypothetical world where you couldn't because something happened to your telly, you kicked it like Robert De Niro in Taxi Driver, it broke, you'd go, oh, no, I've only got the internet. What am I going to do? Oh, I'll watch and listen to Dixon Cox.
Yeah, and I'd definitely subscribe because that
Yes.
would be the decent thing to do. So, I mean,
You're right, and I'd probably even go to nickdixon.net for the full version and pay the price of about a Marks and Spencer sandwich to sign up for a month.
make perfect sense. I mean, hypothetical,
Yes,
but should anything like that ever happen,
right.
just come here. You will find that your favourite headliners
The two best
are here.
here.
And you know, what more could you ask for? Why, you wouldn't even have to stay up to 11 o'clock at night. We'd just be here at any time you wanted.
At your convenience.
Exactly.
Interesting, yeah. Without some other people who you may or may not like as much. So,
Yeah, and there'll be some subjects that we definitely won't cover because they're fucking boring.
yes, great point. And others that we will cover that we couldn't on the telly with Ofcom regulation.
Hypothetical again. Nick,
Hypothetically, luckily that won't ever come up.
no.
So we never have to face it. But this, I was going to say this week, Paul. Yeah, it is this week. It's a weekly podcast. If you've never listened to it before, it's a weekly, light-hearted take on the news, guys. And this week, of course, there are some serious stories. We've got the Liverpool incident. Then Andrew Lawrence got cancelled off the back of it for a joke we'll talk about as well. I've already done a video, so we'll do some different stuff on that. Rupert Lowe, will he join the Tories? He's met with Robert Jenrick. That's quite interesting. Or are the Tories done? And we'll also look at Robert Jenrick's Fairbusters video where he got out there like a vigilante.
Amazing.
And we're going to talk about the Macron slap or push. What is that all about? Madness there. And Tommy Robinson gets released from the Nick. So we might talk about that as well. Some of that might be behind the paywall at nickdixon.net, but we'll do our best to give you great value on YouTube as well, because that's the kind of guys we are.
You weren't just for clarity, you weren't holding him. When you say Tommy Robinson was released from the Nick,
No.
you've not been holding him, have you?
I couldn't. He'd chin me within seconds, Paul. One thing we know about Tommy, he's not afraid to just chin someone immediately if they give him some guff.
No, he's old school.
I would have a slight height advantage on him, but
Wouldn't we
he
all?
would have a slight used to chinning people advantage on me. It just sparked me out instantly. What's that? Bang. You're a migrant. Boom. There's that one where he chins a migrant, which is just so on brand. It's just so funny. That's the kind of thing we think is funny on this podcast.
Yeah.
So, Liverpool, Paul, of course, very serious, horrible incident. Hasn't turned out quite as bad as we feared, which is good, but obviously horrific. Seeing the video was horrendous. I was like, why is this on my timeline? You know, sometimes you think, do I even want to see this? Do we need to see It genuinely shocked me to see it. I know some people are just desensitized, but you sometimes think, even though, of course, you've got to hear about these things and face them, but do I want to see it on my timeline? Is that good for people? I really don't know. But it turned out to be a bit different from what some people thought. I didn't post about it because I know how wrong that can go when you make assumptions. However, I did post once it was revealed that it was a 53-year-old white man, which was revealed, I must say, remarkably quickly. I did post something along the lines of, oh, so they can release details of suspects. So they can release details of suspects very quickly when they want to. Interesting. That's all I said. 14k likes, 860,000 views, and plenty of people, in fact, hundreds of people calling me a racist. Insert word we can't say on YouTube.
Some of them
beginning
just
with
me from
T.
fake accounts.
Yeah, some of them were Paul, but he always does that. He has to get his kicks. He's forced to do Dixon Cox. Lots of people call me racist. I stopped clicking on the quote tweets. That's all I'm going to say. I don't think it's a racist point to say it's funny they can release the details immediately.
You have to redefine racism for that to be racist.
Yes. The counter would be, well, they've just learned. They've learned from Southport. They've learned from withholding information. It doesn't work, and now they're doing it. Or is it just because it's white? The police did say we won't always release details. It's like, yes, that's what I thought. But I suppose we have to wait and see. We'd need a third example. Paul, have they learned, or are they just racist police?
So my point on that would be exactly that. We can't prove their point until, unfortunately, the inevitable happens with a non-55-year-old white man from Liverpool,
53.
maybe a 53-year-old brown man from Leicester, or somewhere similar, and then we'll see, won't we? It's impossible to say. It's all very well and good them saying at the moment. And do you know what? I'm willing to give them the benefit of the doubt, Nick, because I don't think anyone in the police has ever lied to anybody. So, look, I think you're being cynical to suggest otherwise.
True, that is true. They've got a spotless record. How dare I? There were some interesting details came out about them, and they sort of tried to. They were sort of saying how normal and almost middle class he is. So this came out in the Times. According to social media, the 53-year-old business owner has competed in triathlons and enjoyed holidays to exotic locations. As if
That's
to
a red
say,
flag.
how could he possibly? There's kind of a bit of American Psycho about that, isn't there?
Yeah, he's just like you, dear reader.
A little bit of Ron Burgundy. I've read many leather-bound books, and I have many leather-bound books. My apartment
Bit of a
smells of
big
rich
deal.
mahogany. Yeah, I go on holiday to exotic locations. It's like, and then everyone said, well, he's just a normal Liverpool dad, a genuinely pleasant family man. So maybe he just panicked. I don't know. Maybe we shouldn't speculate because we'll probably get thrown in jail or something. But it may have just been a case of panic.
Just blindly following Google Maps. Who knows?
Can happen.
Yeah, I mean, look, on the face of it, as we've all said previously, it doesn't really matter what his skin color is. Let's just talk about it and keep it transparent. And what he did was utterly abhorrent. And I haven't seen anybody
is the whitest you can be.
But I haven't seen anybody saying that it was a good thing. So there's no. I've not seen any racism either. I mean, we keep having to redefine words in order to crowbar them into sentences to make narratives work, which is not really how language should work. Words have meaning, and then if you use them incorrectly, you should be brought up on it. But of course, that's not the world in which we live in now. We live in a world where words like racism are incredibly powerful, and therefore you can use them as a political tool to bash your opponents. So as soon as the police come out and said it's a 55-year-old white man, of course it was going to excite both sides of the debate on this. You've got your mega progressive types saying, look, you white people are all like this. This has got nothing to do with skin color or religion. Obviously, immediately forgetting all the evidence. And then on the other side of the argument, people like us going, well, hang on a minute. How come you can so quickly release it when it is a 53-year-old white man who likes exotic holidays and triathlons? So it doesn't. It disproves the theory that it's any more helpful at the moment. Which is because we're at ground zero with this. If in unfortunately 10 terror attacks time, they've very quickly released the details of the suspect, then we can have the debate. Right now, we can't have the debate at all because it doesn't exist. This is the first time it's happened. We just don't know. It's become part of the culture war, and we'll have to wait and see. Unfortunately, and it is very unfortunate, there will be another incident. So, and it's going to require that in order to test their theory. Look. What do you say about it? A celebration in Liverpool. You and I weren't celebrating in Liverpool, but we certainly wouldn't go to the length this chat.
For my team, Paul. We actually managed to lose to Tottenham in the final of all things.
Yeah. Sorry about that.
It's all right.
What can I say? Terrible news. I didn't actually. I was gigging at the time of the game, so I didn't actually see it, but I was seeing the highlights back and. Man United appeared to not turn up, Nick.
Yeah, highlights will be pushing it. I mean, this isn't a football podcast, but if it was, we'd talk in detail about how Man United didn't show up for that final. But one thing, Paul, just on this, Narinder Kaur has come out with a typically low IQ take.
I was going to mention her, but I try not to at all costs. But yes, definitely worthy in this instance.
Well, she has insulted me before and called me all sorts of things. I think she actually called me thick at one point on Twitter. I was like, you sure that's the direction you want to go with this? You want to get me on the brains? Because you could get me on looks, but you've gone with the brains. And I don't think that's going to be your strongest suit. So anyway, God bless her. So she said a white, British, possibly Christian man almost killed children in Liverpool with his car. No protest, no outrage. Why? It's not about protecting women or children. It's about who commits the crime. If the perpetrator isn't from a minority group, the silence is deafening. Deafening. This country is deeply, deeply racist right now. And this is concrete proof. Of course, Narinder could find racism in a glass of water. But, I mean, she's failed to understand that a clear difference between ideological, sort of religious or political Islamist violence, for example, and just someone going mental for whatever reason. Clear difference, isn't it? I mean, so it is very different. That's why there's a lack of outrage. It's a different type of crime. If it was so-called far right as the police claim Southport was. And no, the police have now admitted Southport wasn't, sorry, but obviously the whole establishment and Starmer claimed Southport was, which it wasn't. But let's say it actually was. Let's say the guy had a Nazi swastika. Well, that would be comparable, perhaps, because that would be ideological. But this is not, and that's the difference in that it's not that he's white. But, it's, I mean, why even get into it? Why even wrestle with a pig?
No, I mean, she's professionally obtuse, Narinder. I mean, you can.
I was just say I've called her a pig. That's a metaphor. The point is they enjoy it. You wrestling them both with a pig and they enjoy it. That was my point. She enjoys the conflict online, it seems to me.
Yeah, of course. And it's easy picking something like this for her. And of course, she'll be making money from a tweet like that. So I've always had a bit of fun with Narinder. She does follow me and I follow her back.
She follows me. I don't follow her back.
And it's just so that I can have a bit of fun, really, because I don't take anything she says particularly seriously. As soon as you understand that she's just playing a game, she could choose a side and run with it. She would do exactly the same. It's very, very easy. You can tell because she's just got she's got about 6 key words she uses. One of them's thick. And, she does it. They're specifically chosen to antagonize all the people that she antagonizes. And it's very easy to get sucked into. So I would say fair play to her. It doesn't bother me one iota because I'm sure she's a good mother, wife, daughter, and friend. And
that's weird because before the podcast she was saying she should be deported. What was that about?
I should be deported.
No, Narinder should be.
Yes. Oh, yeah. No, it was. Yeah. Well, of course, I've got a whole scrapbook of stuff that, like knives and shit. But
that's gone straight to the Home Office, of course. That's not really for a podcast. You've sent that straight on.
I don't. I generally don't. I mean, if anyone can, if you wake up and you haven't quite got all your faculties in place and you jump straight onto Twitter and read an Narinder tweet, it can wind you up very quickly. You're like, oh, fucking hell. And then you just take a sip of coffee and you're like, oh, yeah, of course. That's exactly what she's planning to do. And she's just one great big engagement farm for her viewers. So you can ratio her just by jumping on because you can put a comment in and what you suddenly realize is most of her followers are right wing just to get wound up, So she's got. So right. As soon as you jump in and say something witty or about Narinder, you can quickly end up with 500 likes, and it's
there's not that much market for left wing opinions. When you look at Pink News's engagement on their Twitter, it's absolutely abysmal. It's like 3 likes, 17 views, and they've got 300,000 followers. You're like, I think this whole thing's just propped up. This is completely fake. But you're right, Paul. I mean, if you're it's this type of engagement farming, and I got so much engagement on my tweet. I was thinking I actually don't necessarily want this engagement, but I suppose I will get money for all these people calling me racist. But it would be easier to just say, "What's Taylor Swift doing here?" and just clock up those massive numbers. If that's what I wanted, that's what I'd be doing. What do you notice about this Taylor Swift video? I noticed that you're engagement farming.
Exactly, yeah. Oh, by the way, I'm triggered now because you mentioned Pink News, and I wasn't going to mention this publicly, but there's this hypothetical situation going on with headliners, which is totally hypothetical. And they seem to be attacking headliners, and particularly Josh Howie, but they're using a big picture of me to do so. So that's cultural appropriation, Pink News. We don't all look alike on headliners, and I'm not Josh Howie, and I didn't say what he said.
No, but you were the most gammony person they could find at short notice.
Yeah,
welcome to the club, Paul.
Set me in a pink hue as well, and it was during my porkier days. So pink I just looked like I've been.
That's what it should be called. Am I right? See, this is the kind of thing where you don't get on the telly. Pink hues, Paul. Come on, that's gold. Pink hues. I'm going to say it 3 times. I said it 3 times.
It's rose gold.
But Paulie, welcome to the club because I've got an awful picture of me, worse than yours, on Pink News when I was cancelled and piled on by the comedy industry. That made me a bad person, weirdly. And then Pink News piled on me, and it was like, fat idiot complains about nothing. I don't recall the exact. It was something like that. It was horrible. It was like,
consider they're all about identity. They're all about identity. They don't seem to care about our particular identity at all.
Sad, isn't it?
Fair play to them.
I was the victim, not getting booked as a white man, and that was a straight white man. But they didn't care about my victimhood, Paul. Speaking of victimhood, some people are saying Andrew Lawrence is playing the victim. So Andrew Lawrence, good guy, I've known him for many years, but he made this controversial joke about Liverpool, as is his wont, as is his tendency. And I've done a whole video about it on YouTube you can check out. So we won't repeat that. But basically, he said, to be fair, if I was in Liverpool, I'd drive through crowds of people to get the F out of there as well. And I've chosen F there, Paul, even though we actually do swear quite a lot on this podcast. Classic Andrew joke. He did the same thing about the Euros when certain players missed penalties and others scored them. He got cancelled for that. Previously to that, he was cancelled for suggesting that panel shows are booked according to diversity quotas rather than merit. And the comedy industry said they were worried about his mental well-being. So Andrew's got a form and kind of getting cancelled. And he's got form in doing dark jokes. It's what he does. He's kind of dedicated to it. My argument was he's dedicated to it as a sort of pure art. It doesn't come from a place of malice. It's just he believes in comedy about everything. You can mock everything, or you can mock nothing. Those are really the options. Otherwise, it's just going to be what I find offensive, competing with what you find offensive, and that can't really work. So he's just like, everything's up for mocking. Of course, it didn't go down well with the people of Liverpool and with many people who piled on him. He was told to die. His town he lives in was doxed. He was threatened. The worst part for me, just for people who haven't seen my other video, was the hot water comedy coming on and calling it cruelty. And they made this big statement. They said promoters and comedians who continue to book or share a stage with him should think carefully about what that says to audiences. If you're standing by him, you're standing against everything this industry should represent. So I actually said, I don't even mind Liverpool saying this guy's not welcome in Liverpool because we don't like him because he attacked Liverpool. I could almost make a case for that. Like, we don't love people in Cumbria either. And I'm always saying people shouldn't come into the country who don't suit the country. So I've got a kind of weird sort of respect for that. But I don't have respect for them saying it was cruelty, which it wasn't, and for them trying to lean on other venues and people to cancel him. We know how insular the comedy world is. You won't get your acts at this club. If you support Andrew Lawrence, we'll ban all your acts if you're an agent. That kind of thing goes on. And even worse, finally, the Comedy Store pipe up. I used to be represented by these guys, but I left them. No bitterness. It's not about that, but I actually just think they were terrible here. They said, we stand beside Hot Water Comedy and the people of Liverpool. Lawrence won't ever be welcome at any of our store or tour shows. And you go, hang on, you're a comedy club. Now, obviously, Hot Water doing it is one thing. That's a comedy club as well, but at least it's in Liverpool. Now, Comedy Store jumping on. A place where Andrew Lawrence has smashed many times. I've seen him do it. They jump on the bandwagon. A comedy club cancelling comedians, and a comedy club that he's helped promote and help sell tickets by being a great comedian on stage there. You're immediately throwing him under the bus. Not only that, you're doing it in the language of virtue, which I left out of my video. You're doing it while sounding like you're standing for Palestine. We stand beside Hot Water Comedy. Oh, dear Comedy Store, how brave of you. You're cancelling and bullying one individual person who you're throwing under the bus, no pun intended, and he has helped you. He's actually worked for your comedy club. And you're like, we stand beside Hot Water. It's like, get fucked. Like, so now I'm swearing anyway. You're not doing a good thing. You're not standing against any kind of power. You're beating up on one guy who's currently being told to die and being doxxed. Even if you hate the joke, why are you doing that? And why are you doing it under the guise of virtue, you cowardly scum? Paul.
Yeah, I like Andrew. On a personal level.
We've got to move on. I went on a 10-minute rant. You just went, I like Andrew.
Next topic. I think, as do you. We both know him.
He's a very nice guy.
With him, and happy to work with him again.
You're saying you don't stand beside Hot Water Comedy?
I don't know. I mean,
do you have comedy clubs? That's a bit different.
I mean, Hot Water's a great comedy club. As a comedy club promoter myself, who's built something from scratch, Hot Water Comedy Club have done something absolutely monumentous within the comedy industry, and they've done it without the comedy industry. I have nothing but the utmost respect for what they've achieved. They do say something that I don't agree with, and that's that everything this industry should represent. I don't think anyone can prescribe what the industry should represent. It might be what you want it to represent. I can accept that as a statement. Everything we would want the industry to represent. That's fine, and you're well within your rights to book and not book whoever you want. But nobody's the arbiter of comedy. It's the whole, but I don't want guitar lessons, the Ricky Gervais routine. Nobody's asking you to go and see Andrew Lawrence at Hot Water Comedy Club. Andrew Lawrence isn't asking to work at Hot Water Comedy Club. Andrew Lawrence makes the majority of his earnings online, and they've just done a tremendous amount to help him out with engagement. He also does tour shows, and if one venue isn't to book him, there will be a venue that will book him. I have booked Andrew Lawrence in the past, so I can testify that he does have an audience. It's out there, and there are, in the same way, there are audiences for all sorts of other comedians from a different perspective. There's no difference in saying I wouldn't book a trans act because I don't like trans people and what they stand for, than there is saying I wouldn't book Andrew Lawrence because I don't like what he stands for. So what? So what? I mean, the joke itself, the subject matter is something you and I wouldn't touch with a barge pole. And fine. Fine. There's lots of things I wouldn't touch, and Andrew has every right to go at his style of comedy however he wishes, and he often does so in a way that I wouldn't do. But what the hell has that got to do with me or the industry or what his fans like? It's got next to nothing to do with it. And you're either in comedy for comedy, i.e. there is all types of comedy, or you're in it just for the type of comedy you like. And all these things are okay. What you don't get to do, I don't think, is determine what an audience should hear. Mm-hmm. There will be an audience for Andrew Lawrence's comedy. There has been an audience for Andrew Lawrence's comedy with much bigger known stars. Arguably, someone like Frankie Boyle has said much, much worse than that about other subjects. And I'm not going to go into it. It's on record. And Frankie Boyle is a brilliant comedian. The only thing that I've ever seen Frankie Boyle do wrong is completely change his whole style in order to maintain a media career. And look, fair play to him. We've all got families to feed, and we've all got lifestyles to maintain. So whatever. Frankie Boyle's a great comedian. Andrew Lawrence is a great comedian, and I don't think anybody gets the right. So a club is scared, and they. By the way, this isn't brave in any way. It isn't Michael McIntyre that they get it. They're not saying, the biggest comedian in the country can't come and gig with us. That would be brave. And I bet you £1,000 they wouldn't do it. They'd find a way around it. And they'd make an excuse, and they'd be very flexible on their principles if that was the case. Now, I'm not saying Michael McIntyre, by the way, would ever say anything that Andrew Lawrence does. And that's my point entirely. He's a much more ubiquitous comedian because he appeals to a much, much wider audience. And if you put on John Bishop or someone like that at Hot Water, it's going to sell out. If Paul Smith said something, if Mr. Hot Water himself said something offensive about another town or another person, which he does all the time and in a brilliantly funny way, they wouldn't ban Paul Smith. So, it's just because it's easy pickings, it's Andrew Lawrence, they know that they can virtue signal, and they can garner an additional audience by saying, we don't like Andrew Lawrence. Well, okay. He has gigged there before. He's done very well. He's gigged at the store before. He's done exceptionally well. People would enjoy it. They wouldn't necessarily know what he'd said online. It's just a virtue signal. And one thing I would say is that I believe in the autonomy of a business, and they can do what I'm a free speech advocate. So I think within comedy we should have free speech protected, and that includes Andrew Lawrence, and that includes Frankie Boyle, and that includes other people who want to talk about whatever they want to talk about. There's only one judge, and that's the audience. I just don't think there's any bravery in deleting Andrew Lawrence from the Stall or Hot Water Comedy Club when he hasn't got any shows there. He wasn't going to be invited for any shows there. He was already by proxy banned. Mm. So, yes. It doesn't make any difference. It's it doesn't. It's a virtue signal, and it's a shame. But I believe that they can do whatever they want in the same way as I believe Andrew can say whatever he wants. He since himself made a video which doesn't just double down; it quadruples down on what he said. But that's testament to. There's one thing you can't ever accuse Andrew of, and that's duplicity. He makes his jokes. He writes it knowing that it's offensive. He writes it knowing that it appealed to his audience, and he knows that he's going to get outrage. He doesn't then come out afterwards and go, I'm ever so sorry, I didn't mean to do that, because he's not sorry, and he did mean to do it. We probably could do a lot more honesty like that across all industry. So, like it, hate it, indifferent to it. I don't think what you can do is deny that Andrew Lawrence is a very good comedian and has every right to work. And this will blow over as it did previously. and Andrew Lawrence will go on to sell tour tickets, and Andrew Lawrence will go on to make money online because he has a huge audience, and he's done nothing in this really to take away from that audience. It's just totally on par. He hasn't stepped out of the line that Andrew Lawrence has created. So it's, if anything, it's probably going to help him.
All right. It sounded like you were ending your point about 5 times then.
Sorry,
your
mate.
cadence went exactly like you were ending, and then it kept. So I kept trying to cover it, and then it started again. It's fine because you're in a good position to talk about it as a comedy club booker as well. But yeah, a couple of things. I mean, when they say what comedy should be, I just want to pick up on that. When they say this is what it should be about, where is that? Oh yeah, standing against everything this industry should represent. Well, actually, guess who decides that? It's the comedians. It's not the jumped up club owners. No offense, for it's actually, where does it come from? Because you're a comedian as well, but it comes from the comics. So people like Andrew are what form comedy. They are the comedians. What happens is now we've got this industry which is more concerned with being woke than about comedy, and so they go, no, this is what comedy should be, guys. It's like, no, comedy is the comedians. Your job is to put them on a stage and shut up, basically, and do it in the best possible way. So when clubs are telling comedians what comedy should be, then we've gone badly wrong. So the other thing is, I mean, the building that the restaurant in doesn't tell the chef what to serve, right? It's like I just hired this building. It used to be a warehouse. Now you're telling me what kind of what sauce I need with the fish. It's absurd. So, and when they say the power of comedy to challenge, uplift, and connect, well, challenge maybe, but uplift and connect. What's that got to do with some
there is
comedy?
Uplifting and connecting comedy, and you can go and watch it wherever you like, largely on the BBC.
Yes, there's some of that, but also that's not what Andrew does. But also, you could argue it does uplift and connect with his audience, who are the people who were alienated by the mainstream and by the sort of wokeness, whatever, lefty comedy. They come to Andrew Lawrence. Maybe that is uplifting for them. But yeah, that's all nonsense. Just one other thing. Well, unless you've got anything to say on the venues, I've got a wider point actually. But
no, I don't. I think I've made all my point. There is. You have to accept that there are different. It's like saying we should only have salt and vinegar and cheese and onion crisps. This is what the crisp industry stands for.
Yeah, there is an argument. I didn't even make this in my video, but bad taste jokes, whether they're good for society or not, I really don't know. I mean, it is a weird thing that as soon as a tragedy happens, people post awful things. Ari Shafir got in trouble for it after Kobe Bryant died and things like that. There's a tragedy and they put a dark joke. Lots of people do it who aren't comedians. Whether it's good or not, I don't know on a sort of wider scale. Is it a kind of strange tradition that's kind of part of a sort of a degenerate liberal culture? I don't know. That's a larger argument. The other thing is that, but I certainly think cancel culture, you always lose the moral high ground once you're there telling someone to die and cancel them. Isn't it funny how cancel culture hasn't gone anywhere and everyone just said, we should get all his gigs cancelled? There's hundreds of comments going, let's cancel all his gigs. Like, guys, have we learned nothing? We've learned absolutely nothing. The other thing I'd add, and I did say this in my video, is just that we're in silos now. Liverpool's got its own comedy, its own comedians that are just massive in Liverpool, like Paul Smith. Andrew's got his audience, and we've got Comedy Unleashed, which doesn't really translate, which is sort of, maybe people like our friends. But it's funny, isn't it? We've all ended up in silos, and I claim that in this multicultural society, you can't have comedy in the way that we did. And my argument was that the funniest thing you can have is laughs with your mates at school because you know each other so well. And the least funny is what we have now, which is the sort of global multicultural world where anything I say might offend your sensibilities because we don't have anything in common and we don't know what's fine and we're not cool enough with each other to say it. Hence, I can offend your religion and get killed if I'm in France and if I'm Charlie Hebdo. So that's the difference. We don't have this shared culture anymore, and thus comedy can't work in the same way. That was one of my points. We've said loads about that, Paul. Should we move on?
Sure.
Poor old Andrew. Anyway, he'll be all right. He's been cancelled now so many times, but he is a good guy.
I think his reaction to this has been testament to the experience that he's garnered from his several cancellations. Go and watch his video on doubling down.
Yeah, I made my video before I saw that. He definitely did quadruple down, as you say. And that is Andrew's style. Yeah, he's a good guy. Have you noticed, by the way, Paul, that the best people are often the ones who make the darkest jokes, and vice versa?
Well, this is why I think your comparison to making your mates laugh in the playground at school, or the bar, or the football team, or whatever it might be, is so relevant. Because one of the things that's great about that situation is you feel entirely safe to really delve into the dark nature of humour and try and appeal to your friendship group because you have that safety net. You know, they're not going to go. Yeah, they might. You know, they might go. Oh, that's a bit much, Coxie, or whatever. But it's you are safe in there, and you will get the laugh because it just not everything needs to be, you know, candy, floss, and clouds. And isn't it all lovely? And let's identify who the victims are, and let's identify who the victims can't be. Look, one of the reasons I don't even want to go over this. If you don't understand that comedy can be for everybody about everything, if it's very well done, by now, given everything we've had in the culture war and the cancellation war, then there's nothing I can say to change your mind. If you don't like it, you don't like it. I'm not here, and neither is Nick, to convince anybody that you should like Andrew Lawrence's joke. I mean, Andrew Lawrence would probably say it's not his strongest joke, and he could have said it 400 different ways. It still would have been just as offensive. It's just Andrew Lawrence's style of comedy. That's all he did. He did an Andrew Lawrence joke. And you know, in 3 months' time, people look back at it and go, it wasn't that bad, was it?
Right. And the other point we just haven't made is that, of course, comedy is often about the darkest things by its nature. We have gallows humor, and we have... It's not comedy. It's like so people seem to think, you can joke about things. Not that though, because that's serious and dark. So I know that's what comedy's about. And Joan Rivers shouted it at someone in one of her famous.
Yeah, you've shared that. Yeah. By the way, see Nick's video because it's really balanced actually, really really balanced. And the Joan Collins thing is
Rivers.
Joan Collins. Joan Collins does not feature. Just randomly got Joan Collins. Yeah, Joan Rivers. That's brilliant. That's everything we're talking about happening live. Yes. And she makes an incredible point. And the audience clap, not just because they're on her side, because it's like, fucking chill out, mate. You've just made it about you. And that's what this is. And that's why you can virtue signal as much as you like, because people love it to be about them. That's what they really enjoy more than anything.
Yeah, the guy in the audience says it's not funny if you've got a deaf son. And she's like, I've got a deaf mother. Of course it's funny. Yeah, it's not. This is what people think, though. You can joke about X and Y, not Z, though, because that's my thing. It's like, no, the whole point of humor is dealing with dark topics. It's one large point of humor.
It's funny.
It's not
I'm
about
deaf.
just
it's funny.
Yeah. So, and okay, well, that's the Andrew Lawrence thing. Let's move on and do this topic then, which is Rupert. See, we do a bit longer than TV shows that are long running.
Yeah, I mean, no, there aren't any commercial breaks either.
That's interesting. That no commercial breaks, huh? And no.
So you don't got to you can just keep watching and listening. In fact, you can do it wherever you like. You could do it at the gym. You could be cleaning the flat.
Stop it, start it again. Dixon Cox, the future. So there's rumours that Rupert Lowe, well, he has met with Robert Jenrick, and he's open to joining the Tories. And I was a bit worried about this because there's talk of Rupert Lowe doing a new party, and there's talk of him joining the Tories. I thought, he's going to join the Tories, isn't he? Then I watched his interview with Carl Benjamin at Lotus Eaters, and I thought, he's not. He's going to do a new party. And now I'm going back to Tories. So it's very 50-50. He met him at 5 Hertford Street, which, by the way, also used to be Farage's private club. I don't know if you like Farage and Lowe still go there. That could kick off, and a few pints down Hertford Street, just get into fisticuffs.
Outside.
Yeah, take it outside. Who would win that scrap? I mean, that's a problem. Farage is younger, but Lowe's got farm strength. So he met up with Jenrick, and there's talk of him joining the Tories, but then there was also, off the back of this, an interesting poll, maybe not off the back of this, just separately, Red Wall polling, best Prime Minister, and GB News did this, and it turned out that Farage was 27% for best Prime Minister, Starmer 24%, surprisingly high, Johnson 12%, that's ridiculous, Corbyn 9%, Corbyn still in the game, Badenoch 8%, only polling just slightly below Corbyn, which is bad for the Tories. Low 6%, which is, to be fair, higher, considering everyone told us he was completely unknown. That's relatively high. Jenrick, 3%. So he was actually ahead of Jenrick. And Rayner, Miliband and Streeting were lower than 6%. And this came from Merlin Strategy. And what was, just to be clear about who it was, it looked at the Red Wall, which was defined as the 42 constituencies the Conservative Party won from Labour in the 2019 election. That's what it's widely said to mean, isn't it? And Merlin polled these people and found those results. So that was interesting. And you think, well, therefore, should Lowe even join the Tories if he's polling double Jenrick? it almost sort of needs to be. It's silly in a way that Farage is. Of course, it's terrible that Reform treated Rupert Lowe so badly, because the obvious thing would be Lowe is in Reform and then Jenrick goes to Reform maybe. But now with the behaviour of Reform kicking out Lowe in this appalling fashion, you go, well, where are they going to go? You almost feel like Jenrick and Lowe need to start a different party that's just one half of the Tories. It's very strange. So the Tories had lost with Badenoch, but Jenrick's doing quite well and Lowe's doing well, but Reform are doing very well, making all of that semi-irrelevant, some people think. What do you reckon, Paul?
Oh, there's so much there.
I know.
It's incredible. So first things first, I can't see Rupert Lowe joining the Conservatives, but I can see the value in him letting people believe he would. It keeps him on the front pages. It keeps his profile up. If he did, I can only ever see him joining it under a Robert Jenrick leadership. And I see a Robert Jenrick leadership as not really a Conservative party anyway. So I think the Tories are doomed. I think that Robert Jenrick is coming out and making a very good case for himself as a challenge to someone like Nigel Farage, but the only thing that will ever hold him back is he's part of the Tory party, which is going to take a generation for voters.
Why is Jenrick leading? Sorry, not a Conservative party. What did you mean by that?
I just don't see. I believe the way that Robert Jenrick is behaving is totally the antithesis to the way the Conservatives have behaved for 15 to 20 years. The Conservatives, as part of the blob, the uni party, have become very liberal, and Robert Jenrick is actually trying to generate a conservative movement within the Conservative Party. It's not even particularly far. It's not certainly not far right, and it's only just really right wing. Robert Jenrick is still part of the old guard to some degree, but he is really setting his stall out well. And some of the videos he's making, he's capitalised on this very well, and he's looked around and learned a few things. So watch his space when it comes to Robert Jenrick. He could well save the Tory party, but timing is everything. Right now, he needs to let the Tories and Kemi basically fall on their own sword, which is what's happening. It's a very slow car crash at the moment. What's really interesting about that poll is it's a bit like when they do the poll for the greatest song of all time. You often get things chucked in that are just present and current. So you'll get, if you do it in the middle of the early 2000s, Robbie Williams features in there or whatever, because he just happens to be number one at the time. I see Kemi Badenoch, and who else was in there? Wes Streeting and people like that. They're included because they just happen to be present at the moment. I'm not sure why Corbyn's in there. I mean, he's got a big following. It's undeniable. There's got a relatively big following in the mentally ill cohort of our society. But whatever, you get your own choice. And so, what's fascinating still is that Farage is top ahead of Starmer. Starmer's always going to show quite high in there because he is the current prime minister. So people are just, you're asking all sorts of people in society this question, and they're just going to associate. Some people are only going to understand the question because they understand who Keir Starmer is. So I think the fascinating thing for me is we've never had a time in living memory, we've never had a time in modern politics where somebody who is not the opposition leader is the biggest challenge to the government. I can't think. I mean, my knowledge of politics pre-World War II, maybe World War One, is pretty sketchy. I start to understand things a little bit from sort of World War One onwards because, I've watched lots of World War documentaries, and there's a backdrop of UK politics associated to that, so you start to understand how Churchill came to prominence. You say a backdrop
of UK. You're mainly watching for Hitler, of course, but
there's UK I do. Yeah, so all the pro-Hitler stuff is definitely on my watch list. Great orator, a much better painter than people would give him credit for.
Yes,
and much misunderstood.
Stylish,
yeah, very stylish. Misunderstood, some would say.
Yeah,
but. This is satire, by the way. I was going to
say you won't get that on the telly, but because we were on with Lewis Schaefer, you actually will.
You definitely,
you can't say he's all bad.
So I think that everybody's competing. Everybody, and I mean everybody, is competing with Reform and Nigel Farage at the moment because of the optics.
Yeah,
the optics are undeniable. When you look at the landscape of British politics right now, it is Labour versus reform. It's not Labour versus, or the reform movement, should I say, which is all encompassing. It takes in the immigration issue. It takes in Brexit as an issue. It takes in the Red Wall. It takes every disenfranchised voter that probably isn't entirely political and isn't normally interested in politics, and it puts them all in one cohort and pits them against the establishment, which just happens to be Starmer and his Labour Party, which is the pinnacle of dull, bureaucratic establishment politics, career politics of absolute nerdy wells who have no connection with the common person whatsoever. And this is what I mean about the optics. Nigel Farage is a guy that comes from, the upper middle classes, went to a very high fee paying school, is arguably in no way working class. And people use that against him. It makes his dad was not a toolmaker. And his mum, as far as I'm aware, wasn't unwell, and good for her. But the point is, he doesn't need to be. He understands the language. He understands the language of the working class. He understands how they are being impacted by today's politics. So as a result, and because the Conservative Party don't, and because the Liberal Democrats are busy fighting a fight that nobody really understands, and there aren't really anybody else. You've got the mentally ill in the Green parties, and you've got in the Green Party, and you've got and there's nothing wrong with the mentally ill, by the way. There's plenty wrong with the Green Party.
We've got 2 mentally ill people on this podcast, so
we have. We've got a whole we've got a whole podcast devoted to it. And that also, if you did have some free time every night of the week, then you could not only watch this political satire and expert commentary, you can also learn about us a lot more. Maybe learn a lot more about yourself by listening to Dixon Cox Go Mental. Fascinating podcast.
Yes, on Dixon,
behind the paywall.
Great point, Paul. So much there, Paul. But I mean, and Farage, of course, another great orator. Don't know what his painting's like, but I was going to say something else. Starmer, as we record, in fact, has done a press conference, and he just got absolutely hammered. The BBC, of all people, just said to him, why is Farage connecting with voters while your own popularity is plummeting? Something along those lines. It was a brutal question. Like, who's that reporter? Is that GB News? Oh, it's BBC. And someone summarised it here. BBC is today's speech an admission of your popularity failure and Nigel Farage soaring. Sky News, are you running scared from reform? LBC, why are you holding a press conference about Nigel Farage 4 years from an election? GB News, are you panicking? Is Farage rent-free in your head? ITV, do you view Nigel Farage as your main opponent? So Starmer is in trouble with this. I mean, weirdly, and Matt Goodwin has just made a point in a podcast that reform's neither left nor right. Weirdly, on the two-child benefit cap, reform has been outflanking Labour to the left, saying, well, of course, we would have this. We wouldn't be as cruel as Labour. And on winter fuel payment, they're like, we would not scrap the winter fuel payments, which Labour's going to end up pivoting on anyway. Yeah. So they're to the left of Labour. They're far left. And Starmer, of course, with his Enoch Starmer speech, is far right. So strange times, Paul. You and me will be voting Labour because we just want to send them back. Whereas all the lefties will go straight from Corbyn, as you say, mentally ill, but they'll go straight to reform. That's where we are now. Base Starmer and lefty Farage.
He has managed to fill the dark void that has been left by the Conservative Party. Not just left by the Conservative Party, the whole uni-party blob system has left a huge... Has there ever been such a large group of disenfranchised people across the political spectrum? Matt Goodwin's right. You can easily argue that the Reform Party doesn't represent either left or right politics. It can represent both. It can represent all key issues. And what's happening now is the key issues are transcending the traditional left and right politics in the UK.
Yeah.
So there are people on either side of the political spectrum that are having the same issues and being impacted by all the things that the blob has introduced, Tories and Labour. So it does transcend traditional politics, and it's a huge problem for the establishment. You can only imagine the panic that's going on in places like Whitehall at the civil servants and the Labour Party. They don't understand it. This is not just the politics of... They can't win a battle because they don't understand the fight they're fighting.
Right.
Every corner they turn, they find themselves in uncharted territory for them because they are so disconnected with those disenfranchised that they don't know how to speak to them. And we know this because of the way they keep bouncing around like the bounciest ball you've ever seen in your life. Keir Starmer has, what is this?
Yeah.
Enoch Powell then rejoining the EU. That was in the same 7-day period.
Yeah. Yeah. He's
that
like,
wasn't
I want
over
to
7 years.
reset with the EU, and I also see the River Tiber phobic with much blood. So, which one is it, Keir?
It's schizophrenic.
Yes.
It's schizophrenic. It doesn't make any sense. Who is it appealing to? Because let's just say you are, and good on you if you are, you won't be listening to this, but if you're totally uneducated in the world of politics right now, good on you. Why wouldn't you be? Go and do what you're doing, have fun,
That's
enjoy
our
your
audience,
family,
the uneducated.
But if you are uneducated on it because you just choose to opt out, and my point is, why wouldn't you? But if you are sort of on the cusp and now starting to because it's worrying you, start here. Watch us because we're with you on this. We're 100% with you on this. We're seeing it from your perspective. But if you are looking at this now and you think to yourself, I like what Keir Starmer just said on any one of the subjects we just mentioned, and then you go with that for a bit, within 2 days or maybe even 2 hours of investigating the party you decided to follow or the person you decided to support, you will become schizophrenic yourself and become incredibly confused. So hang on a minute, this guy said that, so I support him with that, but over here he's saying that. It's a total antithesis of what he just said there. That's not what you get from Nigel Farage, Rupert Lowe, Robert Jenrick.
You don't get it from Farage. You don't get it from Lowe. I think Farage is a bit like that. Farage just sees which way the wind's blowing.
I mean, I know
you don't know what his policies
we've had this debate before.
Yeah, we've had it before. I mean, look, what's clearly true though, Paul, you will get some strange policies because we are in this realignment, as you've identified. Dominic Cummings just spoke about it for an hour to Sky News, and he says the Tories just might be dead. But there's this complete realignment, as we've all said. It's the end of, it's just, we hate Whitehall, we hate whatever you are, we hate the establishment. And what's interesting is how little time people gave Labour. They say, right, Tories completely corrupt, complete failure on immigration, Boris Wave, etc. You're done. Too many leaders, garbage. And then they went, right, we'll give you 10 seconds, Starmer. Right, you haven't done it, you're gone. And they've just completely gone off him. Even more, even I could be reasonable and go like, well, Starmer's talking anti-immigration now. Apparently the trade deals were quite good according to Liam Halligan, at least the India one. Maybe I could be like this rational person and go, hang on, maybe Starmer, there is an argument that Starmer's more likely to get it done than Reform, who have never been in power and can be kind of obsessed with not being seen as racist by the left, where Starmer doesn't care about such things. Once he gets a task, he just does it. So a Starmer who really got behind immigration as being a big problem could, in theory, fix it more even than a Farage. There's one theory. But, the public haven't gone with that theory. They've just gone, right, we gave you a few months. You're the same. You're gone. And they've absolutely just soured on Labour immediately and gone to Reform. And as Goodwin says, neither left nor right. He said an interesting thing in his interview with this Peter McCormack. He said there should be pledge cards for any Tory that wants to do a deal with Reform. They should have to say, I denounced everything the Tories did from 2010 to 2014, and then you can get on board. And so it's not just Tory rejects. He said for every one of those, you should take one person from the Red Wall, a Red Wall type person, whether in politics or not, or adjacent to politics, a lefty, and bring them in. So he's identified that Reform's not left or right. And the people they're really doing well with are the Red Wall contingent, who are floating voters who went from Labour to Tory in 2019 because Boris lied about some stuff, and now they'll go back to Reform. Yes, so that's it. We're a completely new landscape. And unless you want to, let me know if there's anything else you want to say on that before we get to Jenrick's video, because I want to end on Jenrick's hilarious.
Yeah, let's
video.
go to that. I mean, you've already mentioned Cummings. I would say to people out there that we're not going to cover it here too much because we just don't have the time. But it's well worth a watch, even if you don't like Dominic Cummings, because it's an interesting insight. And I think he's right in terms of the Tories might be dead. Not only are the Tories dead. I think the only reason Labour aren't dead at the moment is because they're in power. But the Tories are a busted flush, and nothing they're doing at the moment, other than what we're just about to talk about, is going to help them whatsoever.
Yes. So I thought we'd end the YouTube version. I thought about giving this whole podcast away for free, but we'll probably stick with the paywall, partly because I need a slash. You don't get that on the TV. But what we'll do, we'll end the YouTube and Podbean version with this, which is Robert Jenrick went out amongst the the tube in London, and he just was attacking fare dodgers, running up to fare dodgers and saying, "Excuse me, you're not gonna pay for that. Everyone else has to pay." Just a Zempic Rob just rolling up to people much bigger than him who are a bit stabby, saying, "Are you going to pay?" And quite bold, quite brave, and a kind of Ed Davey if he had balls and if he did something that actually might mean something. And another funny line where he listed a load of things that were wrong with Britain, and one of them was weird Turkish barbershops. I thought it was such a funny line. Weird Turkish. I know some of the people that work with Genric, and there are some very based and smart people working with him, and they're kind of understanding the currents in the country. So that's why his online stuff is often the most kind of in sync with how people like us might feel. And that's why it was really good, because it won't be enough on its own. And people have said it's like accidental partridge. The secret barrister was mocking it, saying it was the most partridge thing ever. It's like people are like, oh, a barrister who's pro crime, interesting. But he's tapping into something which is the unfairness people feel. You've got fare dodgers, so the rest of us have to pay. It's one small version. To be honest, it's not that different. Talking about Ed Davey, it's not that different from the Lib Dems talking about noise pollution on trains. But these are the kind of issues that end up really bothering people, that are kind of just small signs of a decaying culture. Shoplifting, you can just get away with it, up to £200. Fare dodging, music on trains because you've not discovered headphones, and obviously the larger issues are immigration and the boats, the cost of living and everything. But there are all these little issues that grind you down and destroyed our high trust society. So high trust Rob is in there calling them out. What did you make of it, Paul?
Yeah, I don't think the criticisms labelled at him are going to stick, actually, because this comes back to my point about the people criticising don't understand the political landscape now. And the reason they don't understand the political landscape now is because most of us don't, even though that we're engaged with it. The only person that does and is leading the way is the Farage types. And there's always these arguments that the Reform could join in some way with Conservatives, or Rupert Lowe goes to Conservatives. For me, I think what's much more inevitable is the migration goes from Conservatives to Reform. Now, I don't know where it would fit. Nigel Farage is a messiah within Reform, whether he likes that or not, and he can't sack me, Farage, because I don't work for Reform. But if Robert Genric joined Reform, I think you have a really, really powerful coalition there, because he takes people with him. Now, if the migration goes that way, I think Tories are dead and it's over for Labour. If it goes the other way, it starts to work in Labour's favour and Reform are dead. It's just, I mean, I don't know. We've never actually discussed this on or off air, Nick, so I don't know if this is
no one from Reform is going to join Tories, with the exception of Rupert Lowe, possibly because he's been viciously booted out.
So, but of course, but every now and again, and the story just persists, because why wouldn't you just let it? Reform are just going to join, they're not going to join the Tories. Don't get me wrong. This is going to become
a pact that will. Farage apparently said to someone the pact would inevitably happen. I've heard people claim that.
The pact would mean that they would join forces and work together strategically to knock Labour and the Lib Dems out. That's all that means.
Mm-hmm.
I'm actually talking about members of the Conservative Party jumping ship and joining Reform and making Reform a much bigger parliamentary representative during this Parliament.
They'll be desperate to. But that's what Goodwin's saying. They have to sign the pledge if they're going to do it.
Yeah, this is what the pledge card is all about. Sorry, hopefully that didn't make it sound as if I'd come up with some genius idea that no one had thought of. But I just think that if you look at it from that perspective, that the migration takes place from Tories to Reform, and Reform end up with 25, 30, 40 seats because Tories have joined them because of Robert Genric and his supporters, then, boy, does it really become a very, very interesting landscape, because it knocks the Tories out completely. There's nothing There was an argument up until about, I would say, 6 months ago, where even Dominic Cummings was saying there's so many deep-seated blue Tories that they would never, ever, ever think of voting anything other than Tory. But once they kind of wake up and realise that the Tories aren't representing them in any way, which we've seen we are starting to see, then of course it's just going to be replaced by whatever does. And it's time for that landscape to change. I think it's going to be incredibly interesting between now and 2029. The only way Labour can be successful, I think, is if a general election gets called in the next 12 months, because that's not enough time. I think I genuinely believe, and I could be,
So hang on, Starmer calls it early when his popularity is at an all-time low, just brutally low, just because Farage is also not quite ready.
Yeah, that's it. So that's exactly what I'm saying. Because there'll be people watching and listening to this thinking, I'm mad to say that. But right now, because of everything, we, as a society, as a Western society, we believe in brands, okay? If we go to the shop and we like a certain type of tea bag, irrespective of their political views or whatever, we will buy that tea bag because we buy into brands. We like Marks and Spencer, we like Waitrose, we like Sainsbury's, whatever it is. We like it because we have trust and belief in that brand. What's happening with politics is there's still plenty of people are holding on going, it's the Labour Party and the Tories, they're the only real branded politics. We understand them. Keir Starmer, okay, I don't like him, but at least he's got experience. That is crumbling, and it will crumble more between now and 2029. But if between now and I'd say early 2027 a general election was called, I can see just enough people supporting the blob. Whereas another few months after that, I think the equilibrium changes.
Yeah, it's because Labour haven't quite lost it in the same way Tories have. I mean, the realignment has happened. Tories have gone behind reform. They were fourth place in the poll the other day, behind even the Lib Dems. There's no doubt they're behind reform now. But Labour haven't quite been replaced because there's not quite a leftist populist movement in place yet to replace them. There's the Lib Dems and God knows what they're up to, and there isn't a kind of AOC figure in this country just yet. You could get Rayner with the breakout threat to left. If Rayner took over Labour, in a way, that would be a populist uprising from the left, from within the Labour Party taking it over. Unless Rayner went out on her own to form the Abstract Party or something. I just say that because of the abstract. It's been an abstract failure. If she went out to do that, they could threaten. Or Corbyn with his 9% polling above Badenoch. Maybe he could go out, come back. Him and Ange together. Who knows? I don't know how they get on, but it's plausible, isn't it? That's where the Labour populist threat comes from.
It exists.
Mm-hmm.
There is a left.
Oh yeah, but it's within their own party. They've got these sort of 4 factions at least within their own party. I mean, people talk about the Tory factions. Labour have got factions. You've got the McSweeney, Starmer, Streeting kind of faction, and Streeting on an individual level could still oust Starmer, but that's a kind of Blairites. Then you've got the Gordon Brown type people. You've got the Angela Rayners. I mean, there's at least 2, but there's probably more than 2. Conventionally, there's the kind of Blairites and the Corbynites, but there's probably more factions than that, really. But certainly, those are the 2 main ones.
Yeah, exactly. The only time it's going to start to reveal itself is when inevitably Reeves has to go. And there's 2 things that can happen. Starmer loses the support of the grandees within the party, which he quite clearly has. Or Reeves just continues with basic play school economics, driving the country into the ground. And Starmer has no choice but to let it go, and of course naturally exposes himself, and we end up with this big bundle. And there are plenty of people that could fill that space, and we're going to see those factions. And there is, my point is the same as yours, that there is a left populism as much as there is a right populism.
Yeah,
it's just the left populism doesn't work anymore. Angela Rayner, it's all very, get rid of child benefit for the middle classes. We know that politics is broken because so many people are looking at that now going, oh, it's a load of horseshit. I don't think you need to be on the left of politics to think that's not the worst policy ever. Basically, you can earn £999,000 a year between you and your partner at home and still claim child benefit because neither of you have gone over the £50,000 threshold. Arguably, people on £100,000 a year per household don't need that child benefit. It's not mental. I don't think it is mental. I think it's worth a debate. But we've got to the point now where that's just seen as crazy talk because it comes from the left. Neither are you and I. I mean, it doesn't affect you, but it would affect me. And, I opted out of child benefit a long time ago for other reasons. But that type of politics really now just doesn't cut through and people aren't interested anymore. They don't trust. Who trusts Angela Rayner? That's what I would ask. Who trusts?
She's surprisingly popular, Paul. I think you'd be surprised how popular she is.
But who trusts her outside of her bubble? I mean, I can see why she's popular. I mean, she's Labour. There is no purer-bred Labour politician probably than Angela Rayner in that cabinet at the moment. She comes from the unions. She comes from a true working class background. She's pulled herself up by her own bootstraps. She's formidable. She's fierce. She couldn't give a shit about certain things. She represents a lot of things the old Labour movement used to represent. And, you know, I mean, I'm not a big fan of Rayner, but I can understand why people would be. I thoroughly can understand that she's probably got a big populism within her own right. But does she cross politics? Does she transcend politics like Reform do? I don't think so.
That's the challenge. I mean, now that Reform has taken up so many quasi left-wing positions, but you do have a movement there. You see how popular that guy Gary Stevenson, whatever he's called, Stevens is, that annoying YouTuber. You see how popular the kind of rich or evil, let's take the money stuff still is. AOC is going to launch this post-woke left in America. She took out her pronouns. You know, she starts talking about the rich more. And that's what you'll see here, presumably. And one thing you say, though, Paul, is that Starmer's lost the people behind the Labour Party. I'm not sure he quite has yet. The question is when you lose Blair.
Yet. My point is he hasn't yet. When he does.
Well, when he does, right. When he loses Blair, it's over. But Goodwin yesterday, Mike Goodwin shared a YouGov poll. Reform 29%, Labour 21%, Tories 19%. So that shows where we are. Reform is smashing everyone. Tories going into third. They're just beating the Lib Dems in that. In some polls, they're actually fourth. And that's where we are. And Starmer, as we speak, is panicking. I didn't actually watch that press conference because we were recording, but I should have watched that. But basically, he got hammered in the press conference, and he's running scared, and he's reacting to Farage, which is weird because Starmer's the incumbent. Farage should be the one reacting to him, but Starmer's reacting to Farage. So that's very weak. Weak framing.
Unusual.
Weak framing, Paul. Lastly, Paul, what would you do though if Robert Jenrick came up to you and said, "Hey, mate, you haven't paid your fare"? It could happen. It could happen to you tomorrow. Yeah. He's out there, Paul. He's out there. It's like the bat signal. He's out there. You think you're getting away with it with your crime and degeneracy, but there's one man out there.
Do I look like I'm hurdling ticket stalls? I stopped doing that after that Brazilian guy got shot on the tube.
Fair.
You know, that was that. I thought, you know what? It's not worth it.
Not worth it, no. What's that saying me? £1.80.
He's not going to catch me because I'm not stealing any. Well, I'm tempted to steal £199 worth of goods from certain shops to see if I can get away with it, but I just don't look like the bloke who is going to get away with it, do I?
A good point, Paul. I'm tempted to fare dodge just to meet Jenrick and give him some of my policy ideas. Yeah. Just jumping over the barrier. Hey, you're making it unfair for the rest of us. Good to meet you, Rob. Have you considered, the winter fuel payment?
We just start a live Nick Dixon interview.
Yeah. Sorry about that, Rob. I actually did pay. I just then jumped over it to get your attention. I wanted to share this with you. Here's my idea for stopping the boat. I did have to listen to me then for up to 18 minutes. I know people in his team. He's very good, but is he in the wrong party? We know Kemi Badenoch because we didn't really talk about her today, but Kemi just doesn't grasp it at all. God bless her. Sure, she's very smart, but she just hasn't grasped. You're hitting the iceberg. You're about to hit the iceberg.
She's the David Moyes, mate. I like Kemi.
Pure Moyes, you think?
She is the David Moyes. Alex Ferguson's... It doesn't really work, this analogy.
It doesn't work at all, but you're pushing it again.
I do it all the time, and it makes no sense. But she's that person that can never succeed no matter what she does. And what has astonished me is she's made Keir Starmer look good in PMQs. And to be honest, also what's astonished me is how good occasionally Keir Starmer's comebacks are. Now, they can't all be written for him because if you are constantly having jokes written for you, you don't know how to deliver them that quickly. He's quite clearly someone who's been in court a lot and he's very good at it. But my hope when Kemi Badenoch got in was that we'd see some of that fire in her belly, that blood and thunder that we've come to expect from her, where she, no holds barred politics commentary straight at him, going straight for the jugular. We just haven't seen it, hasn't cut through, and he's been able to push her back with quips and made himself look pretty strong in the process. I don't know if Robert Jenrick could fight him. I suspect. Yeah, I mean, you
look at all his videos, Paul.
Yeah, if Keir Starmer didn't pay his fare,
be all over it. But Keir Starmer is the person least likely to dodge a fare that you've ever met. He's like,
oh man, no, he's pretty paying more.
Dodge fare. I knew someone once dodged a fare in 1986. I'd never spoke to him again. That's
that was my brother.
I'm sorry. Rules are rules. Okay. Yes, he's your brother, but he does. Do you want to know somebody who's prepared to just let the whole country down? It's sticking plaster politics. Sorry, that's irrelevant. It's yeah, you're right. He would kick out his own brother from his family for dodging one fare once. But no, Rob Jenner could be good against him. Kemi's just like I'm sure she's smart and everything, but she's like, I'm here today at some weird think tank to say why we have no policies and won't for another 6 years. You're like, Kemi, it's over. Farage is just like, he's destroying you. Your army's decimated. Farage is there with a massive habard. He's just swiping through people. He's like Richard Lionheart, and you're there going, we won't come up with a new strategy yet. It's like your troops are bleeding on the ground.
No, it's a time for populism, and she's failing.
Oh well. Speaking of populism, thanks for listening to the Dixon Cox podcast, the most popular podcast for people that like GB News headliners, but for some reason may not always watch it all the time.
I mean, you may know someone who watches GB News headliners, but isn't really listening to us or podcasts in general. And you might think to yourself, because one day, I don't know this, but one day it might not be available to watch on the television, and those people might be a bit of a loss. And as a great friend to them, you could share maybe the free version on YouTube, and then once they fall in love inevitably with the podcast, perhaps encourage them to subscribe. I'm just saying.
That's really interesting, Paul. I like what you're saying. Yeah, things have a half-life. The sun even famously will burn out at some point. Yeah. We probably things at GB News will never ever end, but some things do end occasionally. So it's a great point, just in case, to get that in there, Paul. I think that's important. And you almost start singing a Talking Head song, and you may find yourself living in a shotgun shack and think, crikey, I could do with a podcast about politics from a light-hearted perspective. And that's what you got. So thank you so much, everyone, for watching and listening. We did an extra bit there. We did it's about an hour 10, but we've got a little bit more to do in the paywall section. We'll talk about the Macron slap. Maybe we'll talk about Tommy Robinson being released. There's not loads to say, but he was released and he looked funny. So that's on nickdixon.net. Go to @PaulCoxComedy on Twitter and Substack for Paul's stuff, and nickdixon.net for everything else. And thank you so much for listening and watching, whether you're a die-hard follower or a new fan that's come across from all kinds of places. And we'll see you again next week. Goodbye.
Goodbye.